Now, the standard joke I make when I'm traveling around the country is that I'm a professor from New York, and so I'm not usually hard to hear. But seeing as I'm from central New York, which as you know is north of upstate New York, and I've got to be careful with those jokes. Turning the tide. So it's interesting. So turning the tide from collection development to community facilitation. I'm having interesting flashbacks today, so pardon me if I stop every so often and try and assimilate. For example, walking by the Rogues Gallery of Priests took me right back to Jesuit high school. I swore someone was going to jump out and pound me against the locker. You always did it in an empty locker because it was really loud but not actionable. I think that's the Jesuits were smart that way. The other thing is that I was just in Maryland last week, and I gave this talk, which the title got a lot of attention, and at which point I had to give a public service announcement that you should not, in fact, burn a library. That wasn't my intention. And so now I've gone from that to flooding things. My next presentations will have to be either about earthquakes or hurricanes. It'll be fun. So what do I mean by turning the tide, and what is this about? A lot of work in this participatory blah blah academic speak is about the theme you're talking about today, which is communities and the way in which communities and libraries interact. And I think that we are in a really, they said it this morning, we're in a really great time to be a librarian because now is the time to totally change what it means, which I understand can be slightly terrifying, but really ultimately liberating. That what it means to be a library, what it means to be a librarian is very much up in the air now. I think there's more to guide us than simply trying to do good stuff. I think a lot of librarianship, and I'll blame myself on the LIS educators, so I'll take this as a Syracuse hit, not a St. John's, we got it right. We do pretty well in teaching a lot of hows. We do pretty well in teaching a lot of what is and what was. I think we need to do a better job of providing guidance for what can be, maybe what should be, because I get self-righteous every so often, but talking about the future and guiding points for the future. But one of the things that's happening now is that we really are looking and talking about communities very differently. We really are, this morning was all about reaching out to a community and serving a community. And what's nice is it's starting to break down some rather traditional sectors, right? It's not, well, this morning we had the public service people, and this afternoon we'll have the technical services people. They're mixing and mingling together. The other thing I think is fabulous is I hate talking about library types, because what I look at is librarians serve communities. And if those communities live in Nassau County, if those communities live in Queens, if those communities go to St. John's, if those are a community of faculty, a community of lawyers, a community of doctors, they're groups of people that come together and seek to share resources in a logical way to make things happen. And so I think there's a lot that academic libraries can learn from public libraries. There's a lot that public libraries can learn from school libraries. I think there's a lot special librarians can learn anyway, my point being. So while I'm going to use this word a lot, community, 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 what I ask for you to do is to not instantly translate that into public, public, public. It really is a group of people that come together around some shared resource, some shared variable. Where they work, where they live, where they play, what they spend, what have you. And right now, if you haven't been paying attention, the library land is talking communities in a very different way. The past 3 ALA presidents have worked with Harwood Institute and community outreach and all of this. But the other thing is, I notice this symposium also talks about sort of the relationship of new media. And so what I'd like to suggest is we're introducing a new media type into the library world. And it's about time. So this is my really, really bad, don't copy this kind of a joke timeline of media inclusion in libraries. So 3000 BC, we started with our tablets, right? And so what I love about the tablet story is these clay tablets, and we have them, made them available. What I love about the clay tablet story is why we still have tablets, right? Which is the history. I don't know how you learned history, but my history was pretty much a rape and pillage version of history. that at some point, some culture came in and destroyed another culture in an attempt to make an empire that was destroyed by another culture that came to, right? So, the Persians, and then, anyway. And if you're at the Library of Alexandria, right, it was either anti-Semitic or anti-Christian or anti-Muslim, but someone hated someone's religion and fire ensued, right? But what I love about that story is that the actual act of attempting to destroy cultures preserved it. That as we burned down these temples and we burned down storehouses of information and clay tablets, we literally put them into a kiln that preserved them for thousands of years. I just love that concept. So, we spent a little time, and in 1,000 years, it took them a while, but they came up with an innovative new mobile technology called scrolls. And there was a committee somewhere going, I don't know, these scroll things, is a flash in the pan? The battery life's not so great on these things. There was a committee, I can guarantee you. And then we were bored, and so it took us a while to get through the Romans and all this other stuff. And so then someone invented manuscripts. And we all wrote them down, and we realized that technology really always meant to have a page turn. That was exciting. Random access. It took us another 970 years to realize that it's all right to include paperbacks into the collections as well. I think that's absolutely hilarious discussion. Many of you may not have lived through that era. I didn't. I was a beneficiary of it. But this was the time where we really had, honest to God, drag-out fights about, do paperbacks belong in libraries? Did anyone see, sorry, slightly sad note. At 79 years old, I believe it was 2 days ago, the inventor of the Choose Your Own Adventure books passed away. I love those books. Go to page 38. Yes. Anyway. So then, because this is also the New Yorker cover of how New Yorkers see the country, right? It's like 104th Street, and then, Rhinebeck, New York, and then Iowa, and then Japan, right? So nothing that happened before that matters. So in 1980s, we began introducing VHS tapes. This was a great revolution. And then in the 1990s, we decided we could do with CDs. And I would like to suggest that today we're about to incorporate a new media type into libraries, and that is community. So this took a while to get to this point, but we're getting there. But so on a slightly less humorous note, if we look at it for a moment, sort of a traditional model, I don't want to undersell the fact that libraries over the past 5-6 decades have gone through a fundamental revolution with how we see collections. I mean, a seismic shift, and to their credit, where we used to look almost exclusively at the idea of some sort of document-like object. Whether that was a scroll or a tablet or a book, it was finite. We could put a number on it, we could put a place on it, we could put it in a bin, we could pull it out, life is good. It was a document. It had semantic integrity, it had all this wonderful stuff. And then we were forced to begin to introduce, on a wider scale, I know we always have special, but on a wider scale, the concept that non-document, non-textual items could be included in collections. We brought in media. I mean, I love the picture you had of all those 16, millimeter films and the reel-to-reel films, and right. I think Michael Buckland once said libraries are the graveyard of technologies past, and we'll try it. Somewhere, someone today can go and get their hands on microfiche if they want to. That's scary. Anyway, right. I use an Eric. I wrote a couple of books for Eric, which none of you probably even remember. They used to send you the microfiche copy of your books. It was, you have one? It's like in a frame. You just don't quite. It's so quaint. So media. We began to look at non-textual items even before we could search for them, even before we could find them. We put those in there. And when I say databases, think about what that took as a conceptual leap to go from the notion of acquisition as in I select this to I'm buying this resource and I really don't know what the hell's in it. I mean, that's a big conceptual shift that when you begin to look at I subscribe to 1,800 journal titles and I don't know what's in it, but it's the best price I can get for the most stuff. That took a lot of guts, right? And then the internet. Let's face it, the internet is part of our collection. It was part of our collection that we're dealing with, and now we're providing ready access to it. And I don't want to pick on previous speakers because that's bad form, but when someone shudders at the fact that students use Wikipedia, we still are going through a bit of a conceptual shift here, right? Which is Wikipedia actually is pretty damn good, particularly as a starting point. I'm part of, on a board, Allison Head runs something called the Publications and Information Literacy, and she did a study of undergraduates, and Wikipedia was the name that shall never be cited. It was the first thing that 90% of the respondents went to, and like none of them ended up citing them in the final paper. And you go, why is it? Because what Wikipedia does great is what librarians have been calling pathfinders forever. It provides an overview of the topic, it provides you lots of citations to start with, and what's bad about that? Anyway, the internet really changed it, and now we're at the dawn of dealing with the idea of services. Services where we're providing software. We were just having a conversation before about setting up a blog in using WordPress. The idea of an API, when we talk about the Digital Public Library of America, there's a library that is providing a software service. When we talk about undergraduates, how many times are undergraduates now put into groups and said, go learn? Now libraries are saying, well, here's collaborative software, and we can provide you ready access to Google Documents or a specialized. So we're providing a radical shift. My point of all of this is that we really have begun to fundamentally rethink the idea of the collection. We have made great strides. And we've gone from the days of this internet thing will make us obsolete to we really are being looked and tasked to think deeply about how we can deal with this. We have real issues where people say, what happens with CNN's website? You go, well, they'll keep it. What happens to CNN's website? Oh, we'll take a picture of it. What happens to CNN's website on the night of elections where it changes minute by minute, second by second? Are you keeping it all? Who is? What are they doing? And that's the place that we are now playing. I sort of throw this offhandedly about libraries have gone from the threat of obsolescence to now Fortune 500 being marveling at the fact that we have 3D printers. There's this open narrative that has changed from libraries being irrelevant to libraries being something, and we think it's cool, but there's this waiting question for what is that thing, and we have to really step up to provide some information vacuum. Because if they're writing another article about tattooed librarians, there is a vacuum in the press cycle, right, that we can fill. Now, I will tell you though, at the same time, looking at our relation to the community, there have also been changes, right? So we can talk about the fact that we have moved from the idea that we can just come to get the collection to a whole host of services, right? So not only do we provide reference, but we provide instructional services, a lot of discussion from Queens, data management in the academic sector. You have a 3 terabyte data set. What are you going to do with it? The library will help you figure that out. Employment support, tutoring support, we provide lots of new services. But I would argue, though, this has not fundamentally changed our relationship to those communities. And where we need to be, and the argument I'm going to make, is that we need to as dramatically change our relationship to our communities as we have seen a dramatic change in the collections that we have been caretakers and stewards of. Because this model really represents the idea of service, right? We serve the community. We are for the community. The community comes to us. But I'm going to argue that this concept of service is much more of a barrier concept than a welcoming concept. That, in fact, that is a firewall that defines us and them. And if you ever want to know about, well, because if you've walked into a library, there are 2 types of people in a library. There are librarians and there are non-librarians. And you say, well, what do you mean? All right, I go in, I see my book, I see my name's misspelled, I'm ticked off. What can I do about it? I can go find a librarian who can actually change the data. Who has the power in this relationship? Who controls this? How welcoming am I in that? I wrote a book. Here it is. Do you have to take it? Who decides? The librarian decides. It's a us versus them. It's for us. This is often talked about as the servant model, not just the service model, which is whatever they need, we'll do it. Because here's where that model can take us and the potential catastrophe it can bring up. And I'm sorry to say, these guys this morning were doing brilliant. But you probably heard what I did, which is when do you stop? right? So the next view of this is, okay, we're doing these services, but we know where we're headed because everything's about the community, whatever the community wants. We're going to go ahead and add childcare, we're going to do startup support, or we'll do GEDs. Okay, we're going to handle tax advice, social services, we heard, testing services, study space, employment data, right? And this list can go on and on and on and on, and when does it stop? The potential problem with this is a couple of fold. The first fold is the notion of a diffusion. Well, what is a library then? I mean, is this the place I go to get social service? Is this the place I go to study? Is this the place I go get a book? The concept of library becomes very diffuse because we never really had to define it. Because before it was collection. Can we help you? And now it's collection, and can we do your taxes, and can we give you a video, and can we help you out finding a date on Thursday night? Whatever it is. So that's the first thing we run into. The other thing we run into is what we're seeing in the public sector is we're seeing a retreat of the public sector services. That was a direct quote from this morning. I love how they set me up. Right? What we're seeing is that where we used to have people to help you do taxes in the local community, they are now sitting in the central office, and the form in the FAQ is left to your help. Oh, we have people to help you do outreach, social services, DMV, whatever it is. Oh, no, we've retreated back. And that e-government discussion is absolutely right. And the positive side of the e-government is for those with the access, knowledge, and training, they can be much more self-sufficient. The opposite side of that is those that do not have the connectivity, services, training are left in the dust. Because we know that simply leaving a tax form does not tell you how to fill out a tax form. Well, we have an FAQ for it. That's problematic at best. We know that, for example, in underserved populations, particularly in urban and rural environments, that these are the lifelines. Everyone has their wonderful smartphones. You know what they use them for? They talk to people with them. Because primarily there's a lot of, for example, moving cultural boundaries. When you leave an FAQ of how to do training and you go to a primarily oral culture, giving them the FAQ in the document doesn't help. I was working with a community college. They had a fabulous tutoring service. A lot of remediation going on at the community college. So they got people coming in, first person in their whole family to go to this college. They didn't know math at the basic level or reading at the basic level, and so the community college built a big infrastructure to bring them up to speed. Brilliant stuff. Then what happened is, this happened to be near an army base, and then we had these little incursions, and so a lot of suddenly their students were off in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they still needed service. So they said, no problem, we can put all our tutoring online. But you know what they did? They didn't put themselves online. They put walk-through, read-through manuals and processes online. So people who needed reading remediation were given something to, wait for it, read. Right? They broke a culture. This wasn't a matter of whether they were intelligent enough or smart enough. They had always learned in an oral culture. This was put to me by the head of the Italian Library Association. He goes, David, I'm not going to do an Italian accent. My wife's Italian, she'd hit me. David, in America, when you want to learn how to make sauce, you go get a cookbook from the library. In Italy, you ask your mother, right? The point of that isn't, well, one reads and one doesn't. It's literally a set of cultural expectations. So we begin to diffuse this because we begin to say, what's in a library? What do we have here? Do we provide tutoring services? As these social services are receding, what one civic organization is left standing in the public sphere that spans an entire community? What? One. It's not the school. You want to get into a school, you better have your ID and security, right? It's the library. It's not the post office. That's where we go to send stuff. It's not the police station. We don't hang out there. It's the library. So the public library is left to pick up the slack from all of our cost-saving efficiencies of government, and in doing so, what we have is a choice. As librarians, because that's the other trick. These services are not offered by a library. These services are not offered by a library. These services are offered by librarians. A library is either an abstract organization a building that shields you from the rain. That's it. There are no libraries in this room. There are librarians that do this. And so the people who have to pick up the slack are librarians. And they say, all right, so congratulations. I'm glad you can organize materials. How are you at childcare? You are fabulous in terms of doing that story time. Can I also ask you to do a little taxation? You know, youth services and business development hand in hand, right? And so what we keep saying, and I see librarians that sit there and go, what am I not expected to do? I got to do maker spaces now? Are you freaking nuts? 3D printing and PVC plastic? And this is insane. So you say, no, Dave, wrong. What you do is you hire specialists. So you hire the social worker, and that's fabulous, except what often happens is the social worker comes and sits in the social worker's office. Or the tax consultant sits in the tax consultant's office. And you end up with these silos. And so pretty soon, you're the government building. You're what town hall used to be, with a set of people who don't necessarily know how to talk. And here's the big thing, don't necessarily share the same values. Because here's the trick, if you go to a room full of librarians, public librarians, you ask them, which do you identify first? As a librarian or as a civil servant? They will say librarian first. That's not true in all of these sectors. We have professional values and ethics that we have to teach. So this potential idea of community, we're going to serve you, has potential destruction. By the way, you said, Dave, you don't like types. Academic libraries, fine. You have an anthropologist as part of your group. You have a geographer as part of your group. You now have tutoring services as part of your group. Same problem in that there are more services popping up, and how do students navigate amongst them? So this model leads to real significant problems. It diffuses the concept of a library. So when people say, I want a library, I want to fund a library, we're just having a brief conversation, what are they funding? What do they need? Let's face it, a lot of people, I like to talk about libraries are loved to death. If you go to say, how do you think your library? Oh, I love my library. Oh, when was the last time you were there? Never. I took my son when he was 2 years old. How is he old? He's like 98 now. I'm very old. Anyway, so we just create this diffuse concept of a library. What is it? We create this jack of all trades, master of none. We overload either librarians' knowledge, or we create this inelegant combination of professionals that are simply housed together. This is what we want to avoid. This is the potential apocalypse. So I'm going to argue that there's another way to do this, but it consists of radically rethinking how we look at a community. And that is, instead of looking at this as the service model, where we have our collections, we have our expertise, we have our services, and they're out there, then it needs to look much more like this. And you say, Dave, you solved it. Clearly, it's a better picture. You've taken that service word out of it, which is always good. No. The idea here is that we need to look at our communities not as those that we serve, but our communities are our collection. This is the collection. This is where the expertise sits. And it is the librarians that facilitate it. So already, for example, look at what changes here. I love the lines out. This is how we talk to our community. How many lines have an arrow going the other way going, this is how we listen to our community? And this is more interesting, this is how we help the community talk to itself. That's the part we're talking about. We've already had, this is how we reach. You want to go to a library conference and have another marketing conversation, enjoy it, right? You want to go to, and we've already started to talk about how we listen to our community. Great, we can do surveys and assessments and all this. How many times have you spent sitting going, I can help you talk to you? And you didn't even know you were there. But I can change that conversation. That's the radical shift, because our communities create documents. Our communities don't simply use the internet, they abuse it. Right? They don't simply sit there and watch cat videos, they can make their own. This idea that the service model also puts our communities as consumers or customers. If you can use the word consumer or customer comfortably in your mission statement or your program plan, change it. Because trust me, you don't want to be in that world. You want to be in the, are they a member? Are they a constituent? Are they, God forbid, a parent, a neighbor, a friend, a faculty member, a student, a person? Because they generate databases and media. And not only that, they have expertise in data management and creating study spaces and tutoring and reference. The idea that we look at our communities not as information poor, that we are trying to fill a gap, but as information rich, that we are trying to unleash, where publisher of the community doesn't mean publisher for a community or into the community. It literally means taking the community's knowledge and publishing it, unleashing it, providing it to the world. When I came down here, right, so I had to drive from Syracuse. Could I go to Queens Library and find out what life is like in Queens? Or is Queens Library there to only show you what life is like elsewhere? Where's your face and vision in there? Right? A lot of libraries, those wonderful services, it's built on a deficit model. If you line up the services of a library and you ask, what does this picture paint? The answer is what our community lacks. Reference. That's where our community is stupid. We fill in the questions they have. What is, right? As opposed to, this is what they want to get done and this is our way of helping, right? What is about employment services? Oh, our community is out of work, so we provide employment services. What about business incubation? Where do they want to start this business? How do they want to start a business? This idea of a deficit model that we serve needs to go away. Our communities are rich and powerful and brilliant and amazing and need to be unleashed. And there is about one civic organization left that spans them. There's one academic organization that spans the disciplines. Back to Maryland. Someone said, how many departments do you have? The guy said, 1,700. They're called our faculty. I said, what do you mean? He goes, every faculty member thinks they're special. Every faculty member is their own discipline, and that's the most important discipline. What spans them all? The academic libraries. Right? The academic library is not just simply there waiting to catch journal articles at the end so they can pay a premium for it. It should be weaving and creating a connective tissue across them. So we need to get out of the idea of a consumption model, and we need to get into the idea that this is our community. Now, Dave, lovely, really pretty. Now, what the hell is a library again? Right? Because this diffuse concept, I could have just made it much worse. I buy that. Let me give you my current working definition, and it's very much a working definition, and I'm very interested in impact, in input and ideas and thinking about this. But I look at a library as a facilitated place of learning and making. So I want to break down some of those words for you. And I'm going to start with place. Now, a place can be physical, but it can also very much be virtual. Now, think about for a moment the libraries you've interacted with. I don't care if they're special, museum libraries, public libraries, whatever. When you interact with them in a physical space, there's all sorts of interesting social design going. Where the stacks are, what they can see, what's put up front, where the flow happens, what that reference desk is, how tall the reference desk is, do they even have a reference desk? When you look at the policies of physical use, when can we kick you out? When are you being disruptive? Why are you being observed? How are you being observed? Do we keep traces of your work? All of that is about how we interact as human beings together in a social environment, right? Now look at the policies for the virtual setting. First of all, can you see anyone else there besides maybe a little Ask Us button? Are your friends there? There's a great study in the UK where they took undergraduates and they ran them through article databases. And they said, what did you think? And their answer was, it was quiet. Now, for those of you who have taken cataloging, of course, noise reduction, we've won. No. What they meant was, when I go searching for something on the net, and I put it up in Facebook, and I do Twitter, and I'm sitting there on Google, I got a whole army around me. What did you think of this? Did you find that? Have you tried this? Have you seen this? Oh, look at this one, right? Twitter streams. I make my students get on Twitter. They're like, I don't want to post pictures of my lunch. And I'm like, that's not the point. And please don't do that. The point is watching what brilliant people in the field are putting and saying, hey, watch this. Hey, look at this. Hey, have you seen this? Hey, try this. It is a collective search effort at a massive global scale. And yet when they go on our online databases, we close out, we put it quiet, and we send them on their own. And what policies do we put in place? Don't steal. Right? And if we could have this picture, we would have it. Copyright, we mean it. Right? Even though philosophically we may hate copyright, we're going to enforce it. It's hard. So it's a place. It allows for collaboration. It allows people to work together physically, whatever. And by the way, the shh thing is not working. The take the most important device in your life and turn it off before you come in is not working. If you're in a school, right, how many people, if you've forgotten your phone, spend the entire day doing this? Right? It's like a heroin addict scratching for a hit, right? Because I can't talk to my wife. And they're like, well, how often do you text your wife anyway? Never, but I can't do it. Right? My son has a smartphone. He's 14 years old. I had to pull him aside and say, if you don't answer your phone, it's going away. Right? Because he never answers it. I was like, why do you have it? He's like, I don't know. I can play Dragon Ball. It's like, oh my God. Anyway. So it allows for collaboration, and it has some sort of mandate. Meaning, it's not just there for fun. There's a mission, and often an investment of power that communities, academic, special, museum, public, whatever, schools, have invested power in this institution. Call it a charter, call it a social contract, call it a mission statement, call it a budget. But they're given some recognition. Okay? So, what do I mean by learning and making? How many people here think that you are in the information business? Terrified to answer that question. How many people here feel comfortable giving me a definition of information? I asked 5 members of my faculty this question. I got 10 answers back. The best one was, I don't know, I don't care. And it's like we treat informing as if it were an active verb. Well, what did you do? I informed. I ran over their cat. I informed. What is it? I put it in a post-it, I put it on their door, and I ran like hell. Right? This idea that somehow reference, when someone comes to ask us a question, we hand them a book, we hand them a collection, we hand them a URL, we're done, is counterintuitive. What we are in is the learning business. What we want them to do is learn something. Learn to do something better, learn to change the worldview. A reference interview is an intensive, highly specialized, highly localized, highly time-dependent learning environment that we create with a member of our communities. Right? It is not simply a push and run. Now, this is different. Remember how I said we are fundamentally looking community. I remember when I first learned reference was to get them to the resource that could answer their question and walk away so that you would not bias their interpretation of the results. You laugh. Read the ALA Code of Ethics and tell me it's changed. Okay? So, it is a learning place. So, it can provide tools for knowledge creation. It can provide the tools for knowledge creation. And by the way, Dave, what's a tool for knowledge creation? Book, database, journal article, buzzsaw, 3D printer, sewing machine, seeds, plot of land, rock. What does it take to create knowledge depends on the individual seeking to create the knowledge. Now, we did a really, really brilliant thing back in the Phoenician era when we identified an alphabet that we could encode information in. But we can't pretend that that created information. Anyone been to Disney World, Epcot? You go through the Spaceship of the Earth? Remember that one? It starts with caveman taking on and Dame Judi Dench's voice comes on. And evolution really began when they could invent writing. My wife hates me going on this ride. Because invariably, at some point, someone down getting on the ride hears, what a documentalist perspective on this. Like, shut up, Dave. It's mastodon. It's okay. So it may include those. So could we have a library full of manufacturing equipment? Yes, if that's what we're seeking in our community to build. Could we have a library full of fabric swatches? Yes, I believe we have that over in the Fashion Institute of Technology across the river. Could we have a library full of rocks? Yes, geological collections. Could we have a library full of books? Sure. But those are tools to do our job, which is learning, not our job. We organize them, we collect them, we understand them, we describe them because it allows us to more efficiently do our job, but it is not our job. Our job is the learning part, right? So what do I mean by making? Is this just 3D printers? Well, making can be everything from an idea to a novel to a prosthetic arm. Right? It's a trendy term. I'm not going to deny that using making here is kind of trendy. It is absolutely a trendy term. But if you look at something like the Fayetteville Free Library up near where I am, they not only have the maker space where you have the ability to go in and do the 3D printing, they have a little maker space where 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds put cardboard together in interesting arrangements and post it in a public wall that they curate. They have teen maker spaces, which are digital production. The point is, do those include books and materials and reading and literacy? Absolutely, but they're looking now at the perspective. And by having the community at the center of what we do, we go deeper and deeper down into the process of making, of thinking, of designing ideas. We don't simply wait till it's done when we can capture the document, and we don't simply promote it at the beginning when we say, read and stories are important. We're there through the whole process, and we can support that whole process. And so what do I mean by facilitated? That's when we start talking about you folks. That's when we start talking about us, which is the mission of a librarian is to help in learning and making. The mission of a librarian is to improve society. Feel free to stop there. Now, I want to just take a moment actually to stop there. This whole notion of librarians being unbiased, about being neutral, about not, how can you improve society by saying that you have no voice? Those don't work together. Public resource, once again, a conversation about creating a new public library. The minute you take a tax dollar in the public sector, you have an influence and impact on that society. That was a tax dollar that could have gone to a sewer, could have gone to parks, could have gone to a fire engine, but it went to you. So you've already changed your environment. In an academic setting, I'm a professor. I would like my salary to go up, close the library, and increase my salary. No, we don't do that because we feel there's value in the library. So we have an influence, and we want it to be a positive influence. And not only do we get that definition from our communities, what do they want to be? Better economic development, better learning and reading, safer environments, more family-friendly, more industry-friendly, what have you. We have a voice in that too. We believe that transparency, for example, is essential in doing that. Right? So, how do we, all right, so we improve society through facilitating knowledge creation in our communities. So how do we facilitate knowledge creation? Well, we do that by providing access. But this is really interesting. Access to what, Dave? You just told us rocks and 3D printers and books. Which ones would you like to pick? And I would say, I would like to pick none of them. Yes, those, they're fine, they're tools. But knowledge is a uniquely human endeavor. It's in here. When you write it down or you put it into a book, that's not knowledge. I'll tell you what, if you've ever taken a book and tried to learn from it by simply rubbing it against your forehead, it doesn't work. If you've ever read through a book and go, this is a piece of crap, and you close it and throw it away, that's not a one-to-one transference because the author probably did not set out to write a piece of crap. Right? We have the idea of interpretation. That object, whether it be a book or a 3D printer or a rock or whatever, is simply a way to promote internal conversation. The access we provide, the access is to knowledge, to people. Yes, books and materials and tools, but essentially expertise and people. The knowledge, knowledge, we provide, so great, we have access to it. I can go up and I can talk to someone who knows about this. I can look at this book and material. But if I don't know how to engage that person, that object, that tool, then it's no good. If I have a great book, but it's in Chinese and I don't read Chinese, have I really provided access to knowledge? So we provide training, how to get on the internet, how to do things efficiently. We provide it, but it's not simply pointing and posting. If you put up a LibGuide on a topic, don't pretend that you have educated a community about that topic. Did you test it? Did you evaluate it? Did you figure out if it made a difference? Did you assess your impact? If not, you're not in the knowledge game, you're in the post and run game. In the environment, we provide a safe physical and intellectual environment to do it in. If you're going to go learn about this topic, am I going to watch you everything and report on it? No, because one of our values is about privacy and the ability to engage all ideas regardless of their origins because we don't know what their outcomes are going to be. I sent my favorite new assignment. I sent my great introductory library students into the academic library. I said, find the most offensive book you can. I highly recommend this. They came back with some very offensive books. Right? So I said, I'm taking Mein Kampf. You can't pull that one. That one's too easy. But they brought back 2 Nazi books. One was the Nazi Cadet book, which was a guide to teaching young Nazis. And the other was the Nazi Party and the Green Movement about the environmental consciousness of the Nazi Party. Now, this is something I hadn't thought of, that possibly they were worried about the environment. But there might be ideas there that we can take, and we say, you know what? But we're going to let you do that. That's also not neutral or an unbiased decision. We make the hard decisions because we are the last civic standing organization and we're intellectually honest and transparent. And finally, if I get to the conversation, I know how to engage in the conversation, I feel safe. Do I want to? Intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Do I bother? Why should I bother? Here's an academic example. Many of the faculty that you are going to be working with are going to go up for tenure. They are strongly, intrinsically motivated to get tenure. It's called keeping their jobs. How many academic librarians have a tenure service where they knock at the beginning of the year and say, hi, I'm Dave, I'm your tenure librarian, I'm going to be helping you get tenure? And you don't just give them an hour on this is Scopus and this is Google Scholar and walk away. You actually sit there and help them make an argument, altmetrics, the whole thing. The great thing about this is if they get tenure, you're their favorite person ever and they'll love you. And if they don't, they have to leave before they can badmouth you. But that's an intrinsic motivation model. It's the one we love. It's the school librarian saying, I found the perfect book and they read the book and now they're literate and I love it. This person came in and I helped them solve a math problem. And we all, as librarians, have these stories that we hold on to how we change people's lives. Because we assume intrinsic motivation. But what about extrinsic motivation? What if instead of, I'm going to help you get tenure, the provost has assigned me to review your case because you're going to lie. And you're going to find every citation ever about your work, regardless of whether it was in a journal, a book, or your mother-in-law scratching, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, and cited a paper, right? Does those count? Right? How do we go in and get an accurate count? How do we talk about impact in an academic environment? How do we talk about altmetrics and bibliometrics and things that are our core skills? But we say, no, we'll let other people deal with it. Why aren't we part of that process? So it's a facilitated place of learning and making. But ultimately what we're talking about is, can we combine these 2 views? The views of librarians as experts, as innovators, as people who understand how to facilitate knowledge creation and do so for the good of society with our values of transparency, of learning, of intellectual safety. How do we combine that amazing power of organizing tools for over 3,000 years, understanding the value of history, understanding the power of an archive is not simply to keep and lock the door, but to keep and constantly remind the world of potential, where we were, where we can go, how we understand. Where special collections becomes not the place, the morgue of old books, but the inspiration area where we combine it with modern research and new thinking and new ways of understanding students. Where we understand that institutional repositories, when there are simply one institution, are useless because faculty span disciplines, and so do our repositories. How do we combine that with the amazing skill of mothers and fathers and professors and carpenters and technicians and physicists and storytellers and local historians. And the value and power of people, informing people, of teachers, of third graders who haven't yet been masked from the true realities that they can do. What happens when we combine these in an institutional context, in a facilitated place of making and learning? Well, what it can look like is, in a public library sector, this form is given out at the Fayetteville Free Library. Every time you borrow a Kindle, every time you come and use a 3D printer, every time you come and learn how to sew, you get this form. I know it's a little text, so I'll read it. First question, what do you love to do? Second question, what are you passionate about? They said they've had some patrons sort of look at them and go, hey. Right? Third question, would you be interested in sharing what you know / teaching it to your neighbors / to the community? Notice, nowhere on this form is, what do you think of the library? Do you love us? Right? How many of our forms when we go do library surveys are, how much do you love us? Do you love us enough to vote for us? Love us. This has nothing to do with them. This form represents a 5-year journey that this library took, where they totally relooked at the idea of community and library volunteers. Library volunteers used to be people who would give us their time to help us do our jobs. Oh, good, you can shelf. Oh, good, you can sort. Oh, good, you can check things out. Now, they start here. And so what they found, for example, is they found a group who knows how to sew. Now, none of the librarians know how to sew. They have a 3D printer, and they have 8 of these programmable Singer sewing machines. And the librarians look at the 3D printer and say, I'll take that any day. Those things with needles scare me. But why do they have them? Because they asked this question and they got this whole group that says, I'm passionate about sewing and making clothing, things knitting, etc. So they said, would you be willing? Yes. And so the people who run the program aren't librarians who pretend to sew. They're sewers that the librarians have helped do it. They're a Civil War expert who worked in a warehouse, but is willing to get up and give a lecture on that topic and to start a whole community around it. When they had the North Onondaga Public Library, a group of members, of community members, come in and say, we're interested in gardening. The library didn't sit there and say, oh, I've got a book on that. They said, we've got plot of land over there, we buy a hose, we're set. And they started a community gardening project. And when, as anyone who's ever raised a tomato knows, in September when we have 5,000 pounds of tomatoes, they started having questions about local sourcing of food and food pantries. And that turned into food deserts, and that turned into the hidden hunger within communities. And they began as a community to take on and solve these problems. What are you passionate about? That's the community as a collection. You go, well, Dave, and I've had this. What about the quality issue? You know, if someone comes in and they say they want to teach us, and I don't want to, I said, this is collection development. This is what librarians have been trained to, except instead of saying, is this book good and acceptable, whatever, they sit and they talk and they say, you know what? Maybe you would be really good to create a pathfinder on this topic versus standing up in front of 20 people. One was pre-literacy. They're tied into the schools. Lots of people talk about public libraries tied into the schools. They actually know the core curriculum. They know pre-literacy skills, and so they work with teachers, and teachers said, here's a good storybook on transportation, and here's a toy that will show people moving and how it moves back so that you can start working with your toddler on these concepts. That comes from this, not from them sitting going, I am now a child development expert. Oh, it's Thursday, I must be a tax expert. That is insane. You can't do it. If librarians try and solve the world's problems, we will fail. If we help the world solve their own problems, we will succeed beyond our dreams. In an academic environment, we can look at the notion of these sort of core cross-disciplinary assault teams. So I work at a research university. That means I get money from National Science Foundation. You know what National Science Foundation wants me to do? They want me to keep data. They want me to put up a blog these days. They want me to write reports and have impact. Ugh. So you know what happens? I go into an academic library and say, I got this grant. They say, do you need to do a blog? Because I got these people over in computer science that can help you with that. Oh, the blog looks like crap? I've got an illustration major that's ready to help you. I can rally a video production crew in 10 seconds.
And by the way, the data management, I'm a librarian, I can handle that. And they pull these cross-disciplinary teams. So an academic library truly spans the scope and capabilities of academia, not simply where they drop off their questions. What does it look like in a special setting? This is one of my favorites. I was at the U.S. Department of Justice in their law library, and they said, Dave, I'm sorry, you're a lawyer. The lawyer said, Dave, because he always starts with Dave, which scares me when the Department of Justice lawyer knows my name. Dave, he said, if I work in criminal and I have a witness that I need to know something about, I can call up a U.S. Marshal to show up with a badge and a gun. Because on the civil division, when someone drops an evil chemical, when someone is discriminating at the voting place, I can't do that. So what I do, I send the librarians after them. Now, that doesn't mean they show up with a badge and a gun. They do get badges, by the way. But they don't get guns. What it means is these folks have access to public records. They have Social Security number access to social public records and sealed records. These become a part of the prosecutorial team. The librarian sits with the team. They work on developing the theory of the case. They work on the evidence of the case. They work on developing it. They're integrated right within that community. They're not lawyers. They don't pretend to be lawyers. They work with lawyers. So this can look however the community needs it to look. And that's the bottom line, which is instead of us looking at the community as a place that we serve, as people who task us with something to do, and instead of trying to stretch ourselves to impossible levels where we seek to do it all for everyone, instead of looking at a library as a collection that we provide access to, if we look at librarians as a fundamental spark in the fire of creativity within our community, if we look at librarians as an essential catalyst to innovation, if we understand that we are not caretakers of a group's stuff, we are not caretakers of materials, we are caretakers of the aspirations and dreams of our communities, we fundamentally change the power, the discussion, and the capabilities of libraries. We are not talking about makerspaces make everything obsolete. I am not talking about the fact that, oh, Dave said books are optional. Clearly he doesn't get that they have power or value. It's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is you are more powerful and valuable than the materials behind you. What you can do is much more fundamental and impressive than what anything can do. Because that's ultimately the business that we're in, learning and human development. And we have skills to do it, and we have knowledge to do it, and we have capability. And what's amazing is back to that being loved to death by libraries, we have love to do it. So the question isn't, do you love your library? Yes. Have you ever been there? No. That second question is completely irrelevant. Because if you have to go someplace to get to you, you've limited the capabilities and options of that community. It's not the place is unimportant. It's not unbound. Once again, don't burn the place. But you're the value. And whatever's behind you, you want to make it rich and powerful and incredible, but don't think for a second, once you're done, that outshines you. You're the value and the power. By moving the community to the center of the library, we move the librarian to the center of the library as well. The library does not define the workers within it. It's librarians. Librarians define the place and tasks and skills as a library. You are the key in it. And that may sound like aggrandizement, but think about the alternative. Either to reduce to the point of obsolescence as more people can fulfill the task of information organization, collection, and document delivery, or become so widespan that you're the next candidate in why government has failed, or you're those people that are over there that simply serve me when the real task needs to get done. I don't think that's a good future for us, and I don't think that's a good future for our communities, be they faculty or students or people who live in an area or New York State residents or people of the world. The world's problems are too fundamental, too important for us to sit back and wait for them to come to us. The world's problems and the needs for solutions are too big for us to think small. I talk right now to every one of you who is a student. If you limit your value, your potential, and your options simply to working in a place to organize stuff, you are curbing and hurting this profession. I want you in this profession to radically change it. It has existed for 4,000 years, not because we stayed the same, but because every generation rips apart librarianships and recreates it for the needs of the community. And that's what we need to do now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.